Okay. So yesterday we were speaking about this woman who is the sota who is. Please close the doors over there, both doors. The woman who the husband suspects of infidelity, and the first thing, just a couple of subtle points we didn't go over yesterday. A couple in the psukim back on 752. On 752, so hit the right bottom line. So it says, "Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, daber el bnei Yisrael v'amarta alehem, ish kisiste ishto v'alo v'mal." Any man whose wife veers off, and the Gemara says that the word siste comes from the word shota, which is foolishness. And the Gemara says, "Ein adam chote elaim ke nichtas v'ruach shtus." A person does not sin unless a spirit of folly enters him. In other words, for a person to sin, knowing the consequences of sin, so he must have gotten some sort of been gripped. He must have been gripped by some sort of foolishness that you even be willing to sin. The commentators point out, why does it say ish ish? It says ish twice. Ish, which is always, anytime it says a double terminology, that means there's an emphasis. For example, when it says most you must, means somebody should certainly be put to death. Then a double emphasis in Torah, two words always is an emphasis. So the commentators point out ish means that a person should never think it's specifying every man. Ish is like saying every single man. If you see your wife doing something, don't assume she hasn't done what she's done. If any man sees that his wife is doing this, don't think, well, my wife wouldn't do that because I am such a prominent or good-looking or charismatic, what do you call it? Right, Itamar. Right, yeah. So that's why, yeah. Ish is gematria Itamar. So the what do you call it? So the Gemara, the Torah is emphasizing don't think that you're the cat's meow and therefore your wife isn't going to do it. Especially if the husband himself, which is usually what breeds this sort of behavior on the part of the wife, when the wife senses that the husband is not being as faithful as he should be. So then a wife starts wandering grazing in other pastures also. Therefore, the first thing the Torah says is it could happen to anybody, number one. Number two, the woman herself is then brought to the Kohen. Now, in the procedure, you'll notice that the way the Kohen says to the wife, he says to her like this. Take a look at Pasuk 21. It's on page 756. It's 6 lines from the top. He says, we'll see something about women's nature over here. It says, V'hishbiya hakohen es ha'isha b'shvuas ha'olah. A kohen invokes an oath. Invokes an oath. V'omar hakohen la'isha. Pay attention carefully. Yitein Hashem osach la'olah v'lishvua b'soch amech. Hashem is going to use you as an example in the people. That means everybody's going to say, wow, look what happened to her. When b'seis Hashem is yerechech nofelas v'zbitnech tzova. When your thighs disintegrate or fall off, and when your stomach swells up. Now the commentaries point out over here that that's not quite the order that it happens. The order that it happens, first there's the physical punishment, then people will talk about it. The Kohen says to her, people are going to be talking about what's going to be happening to you, and then he tells her what's going to happen. Whereas the order of the chronological order is something happens, then people talk about it. You can't talk about something if it didn't happen yet. So the commentaries point out, what is it that bothers a woman? A woman's nature is very much concerned with what are other people going to say. Now everybody's got a little bit of concern, but men, for the most part, if something is really important to them, don't care what other people are going to say. If it gets to the point of really being important. Whereas women are very, I was once giving a talk to some women and I talked about how I find out in many homes, the husband starts yelling and the wife goes over and starts closing the windows. And there's some lady in the lady in the room, she goes, oh, not in my house. In my house, I yell and my husband closes the windows. Right? But normally that's true, especially when you're living near neighbors. Your wife is more concerned. She doesn't care about the husband getting upset. She cares about what are the neighbors going to think. And therefore the Kohen plays on her emotions over here. He says, by the way, first of all, just be realized this is going to be public, this is going to become public knowledge over here. People are going to hear what happened to you, plus there's going to be a negative ramification. Now, more than that, not only she dies, right, but if you look at Pasuk Chav Beis, 22, it says, Uboa maim ha'me'orim ha'ela b'me'ayich. These waters are going to enter your stomach. Latzbos beten v'lanpil yorech, to swell your stomach and to cause your thigh to whatever it is that's going to happen. The amra isha amen amen, and the woman accepts this invocation from the Kohen. So the Medrash says that not only the woman dies, but when the woman drinks, so if she dies, then the adulterer dies as well. Not only she dies, the boyfriend dies too. So the question becomes why? Why does he didn't drink the water? Why does he die? And then we'll get to a very deep idea about this water. But why does he die? The answer is because there's always skeptics. And in life, they're like, no matter what miracle, people say, why does God do miracles for us nowadays? Why does God show us miracles nowadays? What would you like to see? What would you like to see? Well, the splitting of the sea. But even the splitting of the sea, there are people who are skeptics. People have said, yeah, the wind was blowing. The Torah says the wind was blowing. And the wind was blowing and the sea split, so who told you it was a miracle? Well, part of the miracle is that when 600,000 people are trapped by the Egyptian army, and right at the moment that Moshe Rabbeinu stretches out his hand or his staff, and right at the very moment that they need it, the sea happens to split. Yeah, the wind was blowing. Yeah, so the wind's blowing now. Guys, why don't you go out there, try it. Go ahead, go out there, Jake. Go out there with the staff. Change your name to Moses and go see you have that. I'll wait over here for the report. Right? The answer is that at the moment that he does it, that's what we consider a miracle. If you want to be skeptic, you can be skeptical about anything. So here you have a situation where the woman drinks. She has, what do you call it? They erase God's name in the parchment. They pour it in the water. The woman drinks, and the next thing you know, she's starting to swell up, and she's starting to have a reaction. And says, well, yeah, I guess she was. Then you get the skeptics who say, well, not necessarily. Probably she was so terrified of what this water could do. The guy spooked her so bad that she had a psychological reaction that caused a bellyache and she died. Or that she had some yeshiva food, an hour before. It could be, one way or another you can come up with an explanation. By the way, somebody told me there was an experiment, if you're wondering about it, and somebody told me once they did an experiment in a prison, they took these guys who were lifers, murderers, whatever it was, and they said they wanted to conduct an experiment. They need volunteers, and if you're willing to volunteer, then they'll give you better conditions, whatever it is in the prison. The only thing is there is certainly a life risk here. So it's a guy volunteered. What they wanted to do, they wanted to test human endurance. They wanted to test human tolerance of human thermal tolerance. They want to see what kind of cold temperatures a human being could tolerate. So the guy volunteered for it. They said, okay, you have to sign a paper that there's a risk, this, that, and the other. And they put him in a room. There's a big thermometer on the wall. And they said they're going to be dropping the temperature. They want to see what happens as the temperature drops. So they start dropping the temperature. The temperature is down to 20 degrees, 10 degrees, gets to zero, sub-zero, sub-zero, sub-zero. And the guy's getting colder and colder and colder. And he's trying to hold out. And at a certain point, the guy actually died of thermal hypothermia. Then it turned out that what happened was they had never touched the temperature in the room. There was a thermometer in the room, and he was watching this thermometer, and the thermometer dropped, and he was convinced that the temperature was dropping. He froze himself to death. So that means that a person has the ability, don't worry, we don't do that in yeshiva. A person has, not too often anyway, a person has the ability, your mind, the mental state. That's why they have people who are in, with hypnosis. In hypnosis, the guy could tell you, if a guy's in a true hypnotic state, the guy could say to the guy, this is a boiling hot rod, and touch the guy in the skin, and the next thing you know, he's got a welt. The mind is very powerful. So the skeptics could come along and say, sure, she was so terrified that she thought she was going to, So it comes along the Torah says, you know what's going to happen? We're going to prove to you that this is not a result of mental suggestion, of some sort of suggestion or anything else. Because when she drinks the water, if she dies, he dies too. When she dies, now another benefit is because we don't want God's name to be erased. If the woman admits at any point, the Kohen comes along and he says, okay, we're erasing this name into the water. Once the name is erased, you're going to have to drink it. We're going to force you to drink it. If at any point before the name of God is erased into the water, she says, I'm sorry, I am guilty. I'm guilty. I don't want that water to be erased. If she's innocent, she's got nothing to be afraid of. And if she's willing to admit, then, okay, you'll face the consequences. You'll have to do tshuva. You'll have to, you can't go back to your husband, but at least God's name isn't erased. One of the benefits is that once the boyfriend hears about this, he's like, oh, I didn't realize that I'm on the line over here. And then he'll tell her, you know what, maybe you should fess up over here. Just confess. And that's one of the benefits. So he dies for two reasons. One of them is that nobody should cast aspersions on the water. And number two, that maybe he'll get her to confess because he knows that he's next in line as well. Now, what happens if she didn't? What happens if she didn't do anything wrong? So then the Torah says, im tahor, bottom of page 756 says, V'im lo nitme'ah ha'isha utahorehi. If the woman did not become defiled and she is pure, v'niksa v'nizra azara, bottom of 756. And then the woman is, how's the article trap, proven innocent, and she will bear children. Now I told you there's a dispute in the Gemara. One opinion in the Gemara is that if she didn't have children, she'll have children now. And there's another opinion that says that even if she had children, she had difficult births, she's going to have easier births. Those are the two opinions in the Gemara. Now the first question becomes, what should she be rewarded for? Why should she be rewarded? Who are we talking about over here? We're not talking about, we're not talking about a saint. We're talking about a woman whose husband got to the point that he suspected her of hanky-panky. So that she was involved with hanky, yes. That she got to the stage of panky, maybe not, right? But there was definitely some hanky over here. So why should she be rewarded? Not she's going to have children. What if she was childless, she'd have children? I mean, at a minimum, just say to her, listen, lady, you got off. Now start behaving yourself. So why is it that why should she be rewarded? What do you say, Ezra?
Well, because I would think it's very fearful to drink that water. One might be afraid and scared into admitting it if you didn't do something wrong. But if you have real emunah Hashem, you believe that only if you are guilty will the water affect you. And so she clearly has enough emunah Hashem to say, I'll drink. Not
bad. She's got the emunah. She's got the emunah to stick with the truth. Not bad. It could be. The commentaries explain, you see, at a certain point, this woman is taken out and degraded. This is a public demonstration. Not only that, any women in the nearby area have an obligation to come and watch. Everybody has to come and watch this to see what happens to this woman. That they're standing there, even if she doesn't die. Everybody has it. And by the way, this is considered, they let her hair down. When the hair is let down, do you ever notice from girls, well, you don't notice girls, but if you ever notice, from girls have their hairs braided usually, right? Or in ponytails, or it went from girls on the street. The hair being let out like a horse's mane, that's considered not modest. That's immodest. That's why from girls, their hair is what's it called, a ponytail. The hair is put in a something or others, or the hair is very short. Hasidic girls have their hair braided and in ponytails. There was one of the, what do you call it? No, they don't shave. The girls don't shave. The women in certain Hasidic groups, for certain reasons, technical reasons, there are women that shave their head in a limited chesed. Don't worry, guys. Don't be afraid. Your wife is not going to shave her head, right? In limited, there is a certain Hasidic group. There, the women do shave their head because of certain halachic concerns when it comes to immersion in the mikveh. There are certain. That's one group. That's one type. One group. As a matter of fact, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein was asked a question about a young lady from this Hasidic group who married a man from a different Hasidic group, and she wanted very much to follow her family tradition of shaving her head, because that was the family tradition, and he was not particularly thrilled about being married to a bowling ball. This created a certain amount of strife and stress in the marriage. And they then asked a question to Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein said that to follow a family custom, is a very wonderful thing and a very important thing. But the halacha that a wife has to please her husband, that's already a halacha. and therefore it's a no-brainer, and she's not allowed to do something that goes against her husband's wishes. That's what Rav Moshe finds in Paskin. Okay, I don't want to go into the whole but that's what Rav Moshe finds in Paskin. The point here is that this woman is made a public spectacle of. She's been embarrassed in public. Women take embarrassment far worse than men, and even men, embarrassment hurts. For women, it's devastating. Since she's been embarrassed, and she was accused of something which she didn't do. She's no tzaddikus. She's not righteous. She did not behave properly, but she was not as bad as she was accused of. Therefore, she has to be appeased in some way, and therefore she gets the children or she has the birth because she was ovary. That has to be compensated for. You punishment. What are you punished for? You're already punished for your misbehavior. That means you're already punished for doing something inappropriate. Imagine a guy goes into a McDonald's. Guy sits down in a McDonald's, but he doesn't eat a burger. Just sitting in a McDonald's. I walk past, you're eating a kosher hamburger in a McDonald's. And I walk past and I see, they know, oh boy, what are you doing in a McDonald's? You're not supposed to be in a McDonald's. And it looks very bad. And it could be according to some posting, it's a Mari Sayan. What are you doing? It's got the appearance of, you've already done something wrong, even if you haven't eaten a cheeseburger. So you've already done, she's done something wrong. She was punished for what she did wrong. She was embarrassed in public. But the accusation was a false accusation, because at the end of the day, she didn't do what she was accused of. Therefore, we let her off the hook. Yeah. Okay. I want to go on. Okay. One other point here. At a deeper level, let's take this to a deeper level. This woman drank the name of God. It was erased and it was put into the water. The holiness of Hashem's name in the entire world, God represents expansion, creation, growth, movement, expansion. If she drinks the water has got to expand one way or another because it's got God's name in it. If she's guilty, the water is going to expand but has no exit. So what's going to happen? Her stomach is going to swell. If she's innocent, there's going to be a different expansion. Either she'll have a child, which is a form of expansion, or it'll be easier for her to give birth. There'll be expansion in that way. But one way or another, that water is going to have an effect. When you take God into your system, it has an effect. At our level, it's like a person who studies Torah. When you study Torah, what are you doing in its essence? What do we do when we study Torah? We're taking God into our system. We're absorbing God into it. It has an effect. It has an effect on our behavior. It has an effect on our outlook on life. It has an effect on how we treat other people because we've taken God into our system. When you pray, to a certain prayer is a form. We think prayer is us giving something to God. When you pray, it's because you're taking God into your system. You're acknowledging that everything you have is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So prayer has an effect because you've taken God into your system. So she's drunk down to a physical form of Hashem's name. It's an unbelievable thought. She's taken Hashem into her system. When you take Hashem into your system, there's got to be some sort of, Jake, can we make it a little colder in here? There's got to be some sort of, some sort of effect as a result of what happens, and that's why she's going to be rewarded with children. Okay, now I want to go on to something else because it's going to be, I just want to speak about Shavuos a little bit. Colder, not hotter, colder. Oh, that warm air. Okay, yeah. A bad day to have warm air coming in. Thanks, Ron. The what do you call it? Now, I want to talk about Shavuos a little bit because there's an idea here that you've heard about. You've heard a lot about it. I don't know how much you know about it. You've heard about this idea. I mean, it has to do with marriage. We've been talking about marriage over here with the husband and wife. Yesterday we were talking about Shalom Bayis. So there is the what do you call it? Marriage. There is the allegorical marriage, the metaphorical marriage between God and the Jewish people, which takes place on Shavuos when God gives the Torah. And according to some, you've heard the idea of the mountain dangling in the air over the heads of the Jewish people, right? God held the mountain over Jewish people. You've heard of that idea? Have you heard this idea? Okay. So that mountain, according to some, represents the chuppah. You know, when Chassid and Kala get married, so there's a chuppah. You stand under the chuppah, represents the new home that the couple are going to build. So the mountain, Hashem is always regarded as the bridegroom and the Jewish people are the bride. That's the metaphorical relationship which you see in Song of Songs in Shir Hashem, that Hashem is the bridegroom, the Jewish people are the bride. Okay, now, so we'll talk about what happened at Har Sinai. Okay, now listen carefully. And not only that, the Jewish people are called the unfaithful bride, very similar to the Sota. The Jewish people are called the unfaithful bride because right at the chuppah, they went and committed adultery by worshiping the golden calf. Wow. And that's why one of the reasons Moshe Rabbeinu gave them to drink, those who he checked. Some were executed outright, and some of them were given to drink the water, and they died from the water, just like a Sota, Rashi points out over there, when they worshiped the golden calf. So there's a very, very strong parallel. Now, the Talmud says like this, I want you to listen carefully, because every word of the Talmud is precisely measured in how they describe it. The Gemara says in Shabbos, if you want to look it up, it's on page 88a in Shabbos, if you look up the Gemara, it's Peiches Amud Aleph. So the Gemara says, Kafa aleihem es ahar kigigis. God held the mountain over the Jewish people like a barrel. And he said to the Jewish people, Im tekablena mutav. If you accept the Torah, very good. V'im lav, if not, sham teik v'raschem, that's where you're going to be buried. Now the plain meaning of the Talmud sounds like there's a threat. Right? What's the threat? The threat is that if you're under a mountain and God lets it go, so then you get buried under the mountain, which is very unpleasant. It takes up a lot of time. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Im tekablena mutav, v'im lav sham teik v'raschem, that's where you're going to be buried. Okay. I think it's the Maharal who explains that it's not literally a threat, and he didn't literally hold a mountain over the head. It was just that it was so obvious to accept the Torah, to the Jewish people, it was so obvious that they should accept the Torah, so it would be described as being obvious that if a mountain's over your head, you would say you'll do anything if somebody's holding a mountain over your head. That's how I think the Maharal, if I'm not mistaken, that's how he explains it. But I want to take it to a different idea. There are two questions in the Gemara. First of all, how do you say here and how do you say there in modern Hebrew? How do you say here? Po and sham. Okay? Now, if you listen to the terminology, the Gemara says, God said to the Jewish people, if you accept the Torah good, held a mountain over like a barrel, v'im lav, if not, sham teik v'raschem. That's where you're going to be buried. Why should it say sham? If you drop a mountain on somebody, is he sham or is he po? He's po. Boy, is he po. You are very, very po. You're never as po as you are when you're underneath a mountain. You're very, very po. Splat, po. That's probably the sound it makes. Po. And down he goes. Okay? So why did the Gemara say sham, number one? Number two, imagine the following. Your brother comes running into the house. He's in a cold sweat. Your brother comes running into the house. And you say, what's wrong? What's wrong? He said, I was outside. And I saw this cat was chasing me, but to me it seemed like a leopard. Okay, I understand your brother is afraid of cats, and he's describing to you, how terrified he is of cats? To him, a cat is like a leopard. So I understand why he'd be using an analogy. If your brother came running into the house and said, what's wrong? Well, I was outside, I saw a leopard, and to me the leopard was like a cat. Yeah, I wouldn't need an analogy. If I was being chased by a leopard, I would say I saw a leopard and he was very, very much like a leopard, right? I certainly wouldn't draw an analogy to a cat. As a matter of fact, if I saw a cat, I would also say a cat seemed like a cat. I'm scared of cats too. But whatever the case is, just take the garbage in Israel if you don't believe me. But if a guy says the cat, if you're going to use an analogy, you upgrade on the analogy. I'm certainly not going to say it was a leopard that looked like a cat. Okay. Now the Jewish people, there are all sorts of, what are these guys called, these adventurers, what are these guys called, the extreme sports? Isn't there something called extreme sports? Right, like extremely dangerous and foolish sports, right? So there are guys who are mountain climbers, rock climbers, guys climb Everest, the K2, and all these things, they get killed periodically, like very often, and not twice for each person, just very often people get killed. And so imagine that not one mountain climber in history saw something the Jewish people saw. According to the Gemara. What did they see? They saw the underside of a mountain. No one in history has ever seen that. An underside of a mountain dangling in the air and seeing the underside of a mountain. No one's ever seen that. People have seen the top, nobody's seen the underside. Now, gentlemen, look up for a second. Good. It's a control thing. Now, look up, okay? Now, this is the underside of a mountain, and it is dangling about 6 feet over our heads. And at that point, I say to you, will you accept the Torah?
Yes.
Yeah, why?
Not definitional.
No, that's what they said. If I say to you, one second, if I say to you, you look up, I say, that is a mountain being dangled over your head. Will you accept the Torah? Yes, we are so Nasso v'nishma. That's my favorite word, is Nasso v'nishma. Just hold that thing, will you? Right? There's a mountain over there. Now, question. If I held a mountain over your head, and you knew this is a mountain, and I would say to you, I'm holding a mountain over you like a barrel. Oh, it's a mountain. A big deal. Uh-oh, looks like a barrel. Right? That does not make any sense. That does not make it, and yet that's what the Gemara says. The Gemara says he held the mountain over them like a barrel. Now, if you held a barrel over my head, and I was scared of the barrel, and I want to tell you how scared I was of the barrel, I would say, uh-oh, it's a barrel. Uh-oh, it looks like a mountain. To me, it's a mountain. You understand? The Gemara does not make sense the way it appears. He held a mountain over them like a barrel. I would say he held a barrel over them like a mountain. And if already you talk about a mountain, I would say he held the mountain over them like a mountain. That would be very accurate, because a mountain is enough of a threat. A mountain, it's a barrel, you know. A mountain's a mountain. That's enough of a threat. So what's really going on here? The answer is that the Talmud is very precise in its wording. He says he held the mountain over them like a barrel. What kind of barrel? An inverted, hollowed out barrel.
Right.
Now, if I lower a mountain over you, which is hollowed out, and I lower a mountain, if I lower a mountain over you, what happens to you? On the one hand, you're trapped, right? You're trapped inside a mountain. You can't get out. On the other hand, nothing can penetrate in. So, a person looking at Torah from the outside correctly perceives a very, very regimented, limiting system of life. You can't do this, you have to do this, you can't eat this, you've got to be here at a certain time in a certain place, you've got rules, regulations, standards, and you've got to do it, you must comply. A person looking in from the outside often thinks, hey, this is not doable. And not only is it not doable, I'm going to be miserable with it. This is going to ruin my life. I'm going to have so many restrictions, so many things that I can't do, and this Torah comes along, tell me that I want to do, and this Torah just puts limitations on me. So Hashem is saying to the Jewish people, you're right in what it looks like superficially. Shabbos, can't turn on lights, and you can't drive your car, and you can't use your phone, and you can't call up, can't, or you die. Right? That's what it looks like. Until a person tries Shabbos and he says, hey, this is really refreshing. I get to sit at a table and communicate with my family 3 times in the course of 24 hours, which is unheard of in any religion in the world. 3 times in the course of 24 hours, my family, no matter how busy they are during the week, no matter what we're caught up with and what we're engaging in, 3 times in 24 hours, a family sits together and communicates. Even more than that. The laws that say what I can't do prevent any distraction, which ensures that the communication takes place. Isn't that remarkable? Yeah, but how do you keep these laws? You get used to it like anything else. You grew up, you were taught to say please and thank you. You know what to do at a red light. How do you know what to do at a red light? You knew long before you ever read it in a book, you knew what to do at a red light. Because you were 2 years old sitting in the back of your father's car when he was driving, and you probably drove him nuts too. Red light, stop. Green light, go. Yellow light, mommy, stop. Daddy, go. Right? Because you're a precocious youngster. So you saw what happened. You know what happened. So you live up. If you grow up the child grows up in a Torah home. So he knows that Saturday night you make Havdalah, you do like this, and you take the Besamim, you like this. If you're 1.5, my grandson's 1.5. He tries to eat them. He's machmir, right? And you grow up. There's a kiddush. You don't touch this. At Shabbos is muksa. You get used to it. And what are the benefits? You find out, hey, this makes for good family relationships. Gives you a purpose. Gives a fun. And on top of it all, I haven't been deprived of any of life's pleasures because the food is good. Everything else is permissible under certain circumstances. I haven't missed out on anything. That's what the Gemara is saying. Gemara is saying, God said to the Jewish people, I'm lowering a mountain over you like a barrel. Im tekablena, if you accept the Torah mutav, good. That's the best way you could possibly live. Because I, who created you and give you instructions for how to enjoy this world and life in this world, I'm giving you a Torah that tells you this is the best way for a human being to live. How do I know? Because I'm the designer. I'm the one who created the system. Im lav, you don't want the Torah? You want to go outside the mountain, the protective walls of the mountain, which keep you in and prevent other things from infiltrating. You want to go out to that world over there. That world, Sham, take for us. And that's why it doesn't say Po, because it's not a physical threat. That world will bury you. The world with its lack of values, the world with its lack of any decency, with the vulgarity, that world will bury you. Because theoretically, the people in that world should just be pleased as punch. They just walk around fulfilled and content. Do you really see that? Why? Because if you live without rules, so then your life is, what do you call it? So what do the rules do? The rules don't deprive us. The rules can help us to gain a control so that we can enjoy what the world has to offer instead of abusing. There's a very big difference. There's a very big difference between enjoying and abusing. Even more than that. Let's go back to there's a different question here. A whole lot of questions for a second, because it's a very important concept. People often have trouble, again, looking in from the outside. We've all been on the outside at some point. Looking in on the outside, how can you live like that? And how can a person live with that kind of self-control? And isn't he miserable? And at the end of the day, a person tries it and finds out that, you know what, it's doable. That's first of all. Somebody said to me, well, how can you get through a Shabbos without flipping on a light switch? How do you get through Shabbos? I mean, you walk out of a bathroom, oops. Doesn't ever happen to you, oops. It happens at every house. Oops. Well, you get the double oops. Oops, oops. You never heard that? Oops, 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 oops. Right? Oh, you don't turn on lights, so how do you avoid flipping lights on Shabbos? I guarantee you, every single one of you can get through the next Shabbos, will get through the next Shabbos without flipping a light switch. You know how I know? Because if I pay you $100 to do it, you'd succeed. Because then on Erev Shabbos, you would tape down every light switch in the house, or you would tape your arms to your sides, or you would sabotage the entire electric supply of the city. But one way or another, you were going to get that $100. So in my house, that's one of my jobs on Erev Shabbos. I have several jobs. I have to prepare the candles, I have to tape down the light switch, I have to taste the kugel. Right? And I'm getting good at them. I'm good. Right? So I walk out of Erev Shabbat, it takes me 5 minutes, I tape down the light switch. It's important enough, and I tape them down. Now they even have nifty, what do you call it? So you ever see they put Velcro over the light switch, and you can put a guard on it. So, and it happens once in a while that I come out of a bathroom, oops, and you hit a guard, you hit the tape, you hit something. You prevent it. Okay, and if it goes on by accident, it's also nishkeferlich. It's not the end of the world. It's not the beginning of the world, it's not the end of the world. So at the end of the day, it's all kosher food. We got, you know how much food there is, how much Jewish. There are over 300,000. The last study I read, there are over 300,000 kosher products in the world that have kosher supervision. And some of them are actually kosher. Right? Over 300,000 products in the world that have kosher supervision. Can you imagine? There's in a city in the world. When I was growing up, kosher food wasn't nowadays you could go into a supermarket in Santa Fe and you'll find salami with an OU on it. It's so difficult. Kosher restaurants, kosher. Okay, so you can't eat swordfish. I don't know if you ever have and have you ever thought about it, ever wanted to. You can't have octopus. How do you like that? You can't have octopus. Okay, there it goes. Life's not worth living anymore. You understand? So it's all doable. That's what the Torah says. Im tekablena mutav. If you accept it, very good. So I want to tell you a story. The guy, I think I told you this once. This king, the king's running through the forest. I told you the story. I told you the story about the king. The king's running through a forest, and the bad guys are chasing him. That's why the king's running. He's not out for a jog. The bad guys are chasing the king. The king's running through a forest. As you run through the forest, the bad guys are chasing him, and he sees a little house somewhere in the forest. So he goes, he knocks on the door. Guy opens the door. King says, "Quick, hide me. The bad guys are after me. Hide me. You got to hide me." The guy says to the king, "Listen, I haven't got a whole lot of place over here. Come here." He pulls him into the back room. He says, "A very wide bed." He says, "Get on the floor. Get against the wall. Maybe they won't see you under the bed." Okay, a few minutes later, the bad guys barge in. They're looking for the king. One guy goes into the room where the king's under the bed. He looks under the bed. He can't see anything. It's dark all the way. The edge is dark. So he pulls out his sword, and he pokes his sword under the bed as far as he can. The sword comes about half an inch from the king's nose. The king is looking at the sword. Guy pulls it out, checks to see if there's any blood on the sword, sticks it in again, half an inch from the king's nose. Pulls it out. No king. They don't find the king. They leave. 10 minutes later, the king's entourage, the search party arrives. They pull the king out from under the bed, and the king says to the guy, well, you know how it goes in these stories, now you get to ask for anything you want. So the guy says to the king, well, I don't have much. I don't really want much. I don't need much. There is one thing I want. He goes, yes, anything. He says, I want to know what was going through your mind when that sword was half an inch from you and thought you were going to die. The king goes ballistic. The king explodes. He says, you fool, you idiot. You could have had anything you wanted. You could have had wealth. You could have honor. Anything you wanted. And you ask for that nonsense, and even more than that, you insult me in front of my men. You imply that I can't give you something a little more significant than that. I sentence you to immediate death. They bring out the portable chopping block, put the guy's head on the block. Guy comes out with the hatchet. He says, to count to 3, chop his head off violently. 1, 2, don't chop. Guy looks up and goes, that's what it felt like. It feels so good, huh? Guy says, what? He says, I'm not going to kill you. I'm not even upset. I'm even remotely upset. You asked me what it felt like. How can I possibly explain to you what it feels like? The only way I could possibly make you understand what it feels like to be within an inch of death is to recreate the situation, and then you experience it. Doesn't feel so good, does it? Huh? Doesn't feel so good. It's like people say to me, what's heroin like? Oh, it's just like the marshmallow fluff, but different. How can you possibly explain to somebody what's like? What's skydiving like? Well, it's just like jumping up and down on your bed, but different. You know, just step out of an airplane, then you'll know, and hopefully live to talk about it. Here, the king says, what can I possibly do? How can I possibly make you understand? There's only one way I can make you understand. You have to experience it yourself. Kosh Baruch Hu says, Im tekablena mutov. You look in from the outside. How good could any of this be? They're a bunch of frummies with black hats and white shirts and a bunch of stone-throwing extremists, who only speak Aramaic and have no pleasure in this world. Oh, boy, are you wrong. Oh, are you off, right? Pasuk says, Tamu ur'u ki tov Hashem. Taste it, and you see that Hashem is good. Tamu ur'u. How can you taste something? How does it look? Is it good? Is it good? How's that sandwich? Is it good? Oh, it's really good. Describe it to me. Listen, I can't, that's something I could describe. When you taste it, you experience it. So that's what Shuas is about. Kosh Baruch Hu is saying, I gave you a Torah. It's a beautiful Torah. Tamu ur'u ki tov Hashem. You can't understand it unless you live it. Person tastes the Torah, then you see, you know what? It's not as threatening and intimidating as it looks. That's what the Torah is about. That's what Shuas is about. So it's not just about cheesecake, by the way. Right? So you should have cheesecake. You should enjoy your cheesecake. What do you call it? But whatever. At the end of the day, it's about, and it's not even about staying up all night. Staying up all night's a nice thing. Stay up all night and learn Torah. It's about thinking about what Torah and what a Torah life is. And that's what the mountain is. The mountain is, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, Im tekablena mutav. It's the best way a person could live. All right.